people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Fresh on the heels of her latest victory over Italy's own Silvia Bortot, former champion Michaela Mayer says, I'm ready for Natasha Jonas. I've prepared my body for that fight.
The fight with Silvia was fought just above 140 pounds. I think Michaela weighed in at 142.
I think the Jonas fight will be at a full contracted weight of 147. I don't want easy fights. I've got some big fights ahead of me. One of them is sitting right there, Natasha Jonas, Mayer said. I'm ready for that fight and preparing my body for that fight. It's a big jump going from 130 up to 147. I'm prepared to go to 147 and take on Tasha Jonas straight away. Jonas, like Mayer, moved up several weight classes to become a unified champion at the junior middleweight limit of 154. She then dropped down to welterweight to capture a title earlier this year, the IBF title.
It's a fascinating fight.
Michaela Mayer, the orthodox fighter, to Natasha Jonas, the southpaw.
Very accomplished fighters, the both of them. Great resumes.
Natasha Jonas' powerful backhand versus Michaela Mayer's judicious lead hand, her jab. Her jab really is her best punch.
Natasha Jonas has been in there with anybody from Terry Harper to Katie Taylor.
Former IBF champion Chris Namis, IBF champion Marie-Eve Dicaire, unbeaten Patricia Bergoult.
Taylor's been in there with anyone from Eva Brotnitska to Maiva Hamadouche to Alicia Baumgartner.
It's an excellent fight. It's an excellent fight if they can make it. There's still time, enough time left in this year that they could make the fight for either November or December. We'll see what happens.
If Natasha wins, given her age, that she's 39 years old, though she doesn't look it.
It's a very delicious 39 years old. If she were to win, I don't think she'd stick around the sport much longer because she really doesn't have to. She gets enough work at Sky being a commentator.
Already a two-division champion if she beats Michaela Mayer.
Think about what other fights could happen at or around these weights. Well, most of the fighters and most of the notariable fighters, the notariable names, they're matchroom fighters. I don't expect that Natasha Jonas means to go back over there. She doesn't seem receptive to having a rematch with Terry Harper.
I feel like if she were to win the fight, if she were to beat Michaela Mayer, she might retire.
If Michaela were to win the fight, it is a little different because Michaela Mayer still has a few good years left in the sport, more than Natasha. Michaela's 33, whereas Natasha's 39.
The landscape is the same, though. Most, if not all, of the other notariable fighters at or around these weights, they're matchroom fighters. You're talking about Terry Harper at 154, Jessica McCaskill and Sandy Ryan at 147, Chantel Cameron at 140,
Katie Taylor at 135. Most, if not all, of the other big names, the noteworthy fighters, they're matchroom fighters. So I see a situation to where if Michaela Mayer pulls this off, if Michaela Mayer wins, one way or another, she's gonna have to do business with Matchroom.
Looks that way.
It's not that Boxer and Sky Sports don't have any other prize stallions at or around these weights. They do. Right there at 147, they have Lauren Price, who was in action this past weekend on the same show as Michaela Mayer. But if you're Michaela, what do you want to fight Lauren Price for?
Michaela Mayer wasn't receptive to a Caroline Dubois fight. I don't think she'd be receptive to a Lauren Price fight.
If you're at 147, you actually beat Natasha Jonas, you become IBF champion. The next best fight would be the winner of Sandy Ryan versus Jessica McCaskill. Unification match with the only other champion at the weight.
It's a bigger fight than a Lauren Price fight.
Think about Terry Harper. You know, before it became about Michaela Mayer and Alicia Baumgartner, it was about Michaela Mayer and Terry Harper, who currently reigns as WBA junior middleweight champion just north of welterweight. Maybe Michaela moves up and fight her, maybe Terry comes down. It's still a big fight. And what about the upcoming Chantel Cameron versus Katie Taylor fight? Whether Chantel Cameron wins or loses at 140, beyond that fight, I don't see her staying there that much longer. She might make a decision to join the other girls at 147.
Way I see it, beyond a Natasha Jonas fight, Michaela Mayer's next destination might lie at Matchroom, since it seems to involve so many Matchroom fighters, Matchroom Valkyries.
It's a current contract situation with the people at Top Rank. She's spending a lot of time in the UK. It's understandable why, because most of the good fighters at this weight and the big names, they are UK fighters, so I get that, but these aren't actually Top Rank shows that she's fighting on.
What does she need with them?
A receptive would Michaela Mayer be to signing to Matchroom? Is that a possibility that she would be willing to entertain?
Certainly would uncomplicate the situation.
Cross that bridge when we get to it. First, let's see if they actually make this upcoming Natasha Jonas fight. Men's welterweight news, an interesting set of insights from former two-division champion, current Hall of Fame inductee, Timothy Bradley, who says Terence Crawford would beat a prime Floyd Mayweather. These comments from Tim got a reaction.
It's a conversation.
Terence Crawford would beat a prime Mayweather, Bradley told FightHype.com. I said this 5 years ago, I'm telling you, he would beat him. As Bradley alluded to, he's been singing the praises of Crawford for quite some time. Officially, just a few short days ago, his constant need to prop Crawford up, place him on a pedestal, was validated when he defeated Errol Spence Jr. in one-sided fashion. This conversation exists in a hypothetical realm.
If you're willing to entertain it, if you are willing to use your imagination, evaluating the characteristics of both fighters, their finer qualities,
their strengths, their weaknesses, because in a real-life setting, the fight isn't possible. Floyd Mayweather is an older, much older man than Terence Crawford, so the idea that they could meet in their prime is a fiction.
Fantasy.
I remember the infamous sparring session between Floyd Mayweather Jr. and Errol Spence, back when Errol was a much younger fighter, a younger man who was not yet a champion, on the premise that Errol gave...
They said he gave Floyd some good work. They said that he gave Floyd a black eye in that sparring session.
Errol Spence Jr. did. And you see what Terence Crawford did to Errol Spence Jr. That is the realm where this conversation exists. It's nothing against Floyd,
continued Bradley.
Floyd is one of my favorite fighters of all time. He's a fantastic fighter. He would be Crawford's toughest opponent, but I just think he would have enough to beat Floyd. Crawford would win a close decision.
Preface everything I'm about to say with this. This is a fantasy fight. It's open to interpretation. You are free to interpret it however you wish.
The more interesting takes in reference to this same subject came from Shane Mosley. Shane Mosley feels Terence Crawford would beat Money Mayweather, but would lose to Pretty Boy Floyd.
It's a difference.
Floyd fought fights very differently when he was a younger man as opposed to when he moved up in weight to welterweight, 147 pounds.
You're talking about Pretty Boy Floyd. You're talking about super featherweight Floyd, lightweight Floyd, and super lightweight Floyd.
Whether or not Pretty Boy Floyd is the prime version of Floyd Mayweather all depends on who you ask, because he still put on great performances above 140 pounds. The Canelo Alvarez fight, the Cotto fight, those fights were fought well above 140.
Those fights were at junior middleweight.
Terence Crawford hits hard, said Shane Mosley in an interview with The Art of Dialogue. Crawford is very strong. He has long arms, southpaw, right-handed, and he's coming to get you. I could see Mayweather outboxing him, but I can also see Crawford catching him with one of those funny uppercuts.
Fantasy fights like this.
Because it is a fantasy fight. It is a fantasy, a fiction. They do have their own parameters. They do. Their realm in which they exist, at least the conversation. And what Shane is saying is that Pretty Boy Floyd, that Floyd Mayweather who used to campaign below welterweight, that guy would probably beat Terence Crawford. And I agree with that because
Terence used to campaign at lightweight. He started out at 135.
Floyd started out at 130. So by the time that Floyd got to 135, he was a more experienced fighter than Terence Crawford. So you give me the 135-pound version of Floyd and the 135-pound version of Terence, and I go with Floyd to win that fight because that wasn't a prime Terence Crawford.
Floyd was a more experienced fighter at 135 than Terence was when you think about it. Floyd had already been a champion at 130, became a champion again at 135. That version of Floyd, I think that version of him would beat Terence Crawford in a vacuum.
It's what Shane Mosley's saying, and I agree with it. Depending on the version that Crawford faced, Mosley's opinion on their mouth-watering matchup varies. Money Mayweather, I think Crawford beats. Pretty Boy, I think it might be Pretty Boy because he's more aggressive. He was very fast when he was Pretty Boy Floyd. Used to go for knockouts. He was a very strong puncher in those days, whereas Money Mayweather...
After Floyd moved up in weight and started campaigning at 147 and above, He wasn't a strong finisher anymore. His brittle hands.
He was still fast, he was still sharp, he was still accurate, but he wasn't the puncher at 147 that he was at the lower weights. He wasn't a strong finisher anymore. Whereas Terence Crawford, he remained a strong finisher. Every single guy that he's fought at welterweight, he's stopped, including Errol Spence Jr.
I see what Shane is saying, and I agree.
Big part of the reason Floyd had an advantage over most of the guys that he fought at 147 and above is that he was a faster, more athletic fighter than those fighters, even if he wasn't a stronger puncher. But when he was campaigning at or around those weights, there weren't no guys like Terence Crawford running around. Ambidextrous switch hitters that are also fast, that are also athletic, and are strong finishers. A lot of these guys Floyd fought at those weights, they had heavier feet than he did.
They were slower.
Even if they were stronger punchers than Floyd or durable fighters, they were still slower than him. Slower hands, slower feet. I don't think that would be the situation with a welterweight version of Terence Crawford.
The one that's running around here today.
Before you get in your tits about it, don't tell me that today's Terence Crawford, at least for this conversation, wouldn't be able to give Floyd Mayweather a decent-sized fight and perhaps beat him, because to a lot of people, Castillo beat him.
Remember? They had to run it back.
To some people, Marcos Maidana beat him.
Remember? They had to run it back.
The idea that Floyd was invincible exists in the mind of very childish and infantile individuals who think that just because he retired undefeated, that makes him unbeatable. Is Rocky Marciano unbeatable?
No.
He might have retired undefeated, and credit to him, but that doesn't make him unbeatable. That doesn't make him invincible.
Same applies to Floyd.
Talking about a welterweight version of Terence Crawford and a welterweight version of Floyd Mayweather, which is still an elite fighter by and large, you're talking about a situation where many of the advantages that Floyd had over other fighters, he wouldn't have over Terence, because Terence is athletic like he's athletic. Terence is fast and sharp and light on his feet like Floyd is fast and sharp and light on his feet. But Terence is ambidextrous. He can fight orthodox, he can fight southpaw, and he can make in-fight adjustments.
Which one of Floyd's opponents could do that?
Tell me, which one of Floyd's opponents was ambidextrous?
Understand that as a welterweight, Terence Crawford has a 100% knockout percentage. He's literally knocked out every welterweight that he's fought. So you tell me, who did Floyd fight that was like that? Because even Manny's power started to wane at welterweight.
Terence's didn't. In this hypothetical scenario, when you look at the aforementioned factors, there's definitely a conversation there and reason enough to believe that a welterweight version of Terence would beat a welterweight version of Floyd.
It's not the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Don't get sanctimonious with me. You kids are wet behind the ears. Everything you know about Floyd Mayweather, you learned on YouTube. I watched him. I watched his entire career.
Same as I watched Terence's entire career so far.
I see where Shane Mosley is coming from, and Timothy Bradley. I see what they're saying, and I feel so inclined to agree. Perhaps at lightweight, Pretty Boy would beat Terence Crawford, but at welterweight, Crawford would have the advantage.
Floyd's advantages against most of the guys that he beat were that he was a faster, more athletic fighter than they were.
Would have those advantages over Terence, and Terence brings one or two things to the table that none of Floyd's opponents brought to the table.
So, you know, it's a conversation, and it's not the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Men's middleweight news ahead of his upcoming unification match with IBF champion Vincenzo Gualtieri of Germany. Janibek wants his name mentioned in the pound-for-pound discussion. I believe it will be hard for Janibek to achieve that kind of accord due to the state at the weight. The state of 160 pounds.
This ain't your father's middleweight division.
We all know the usual suspects, right? Canelo Alvarez, Terence Crawford, Jermell Charlo, Naoya Inoue, Gervonta Davis.
Gervonta Davis.
Who wrote this article?
Guy who goes by the name Hans Stemmerstad. Big PBC lover, big PBC supporter.
Isn't it just the other day that Floyd Mayweather was complaining that Gervonta Davis wasn't featured on more pound-for-pound lists? How is he one of the usual suspects?
He isn't.
In any event, Dimitri Bivol and a handful of other great fighters have earned their spot, but while those in boxing circles take their sweet time when putting together those lists, one name that you practically never associate with any pound-for-pound rankings is Janibek Alimkhanuly. While it may be all opinion-based, the current WBO middleweight champion doesn't appreciate his absence from the party. I don't like it when my name is not in the pound-for-pound rankings, said Alimkhanuly on his social media account recently.
It's going to be hard for Janibek to achieve a rank because Usually what gets you ranked on a pound-for-pound list is a signature performance over a high-level fighter.
What it takes to make it on a pound-for-pound list. Taking out the competition, taking out the other champions, cleaning out a weight class, or moving up in weight.
It's not that Janibek doesn't want to, it's that he won't be afforded the opportunity to get a fight with some fighters at middleweight and even super middleweight.
I have to fix this, continued Alim Kanalai. Now you know my one more target. On October 14th in Texas, Alim Kanalai will attempt to secure another world title when he faces unbeaten IBF world champion Vincenzo Gualtieri in a title unification showdown.
Here's the problem.
The other two alphabet titles at this weight are over there on the PBC side of things. Arislandi Lara's got the WBA and absentee champion who hasn't fought in 2 going on 3 years, Jermel Charlo. He's got the WBC. The WBC made it clear they're not going to strip him, and he's under no pressure to return.
He can take his time.
And even if he does return, and he has a voluntary title defense or a mandatory title defense, that still doesn't guarantee that Janibek Alim Kanalai will be granted access to him, because Janibek's with Top Rank and Jermel is with the PBC.
But look at Frank Martin. Frank Martin's with the PBC, and his next fight is going to be with a top-ranked fighter. He's going over to ESPN.
Stephen Fulton, same deal. You know, he's a PBC fighter, but he crossed over to the ESPN side of things more or less to take on Naoya Inoue.
Yeah, he did. And you know what's missing from this situation that was present in those aforementioned situations?
What?
Money.
Janibek Alim Kanalai is not yet a big marquee attraction. He's not yet a big draw. Fighting him doesn't get you a huge purse. So if you're Jermel Charlo...
Jermel would sooner unify titles with the winner of Arislandi Lara versus Danny Garcia before crossing over to Top Rank and ESPN for Janibek. It's an unfortunate situation, but that's the situation.
It is an unfortunate situation, but that's what's going on. You have one of the bigger names at the weight in Chris Eubank Jr., who's more interested in fighting naturally smaller fighters like Conor Benn, older fighters like Kell Brook.
Past it over-the-hill fighters like Gennady Golovkin.
It's a sad state of affairs at 160 pounds. So much so that I'm not sure Janibek will ever get the opportunity to see himself ranked as such. Ranked as a pound-for-pound fighter. Not because he doesn't have the ability, not because he doesn't want to, but because other people don't want to let him. Other people don't want to test their mettle against him.
And you can forget about moving up to 168 and trying your luck up there. The PBC, for the most part, has the run of the place. They're not going to give him an opportunity.
I mean, not so long as he's with Top Rank. Why would they? They have their own fighters to take care of and their own opportunities to give to them. So while Janibek may desire to be ranked amongst the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world, that is contingent upon what fights are made available to him. And at 160, it's a ghost town.
The most you can do to help the situation is keep him active, keep him busy, and hopefully he can rack up more highlight reel knockouts to increase his notoriety.
And thereby increase his marquee value to where fighting him can get you some money. And money is the ultimate motivator. Everybody speaks that language, though here and now, he's not a big draw.
So many of his contemporaries are not drawn to him.